It is my honor and pleasure to present my work on Alice Young as well as Wellington Chung. Actually, my major is modern Korean history. My hobby is to archive researches. And actually, I met with Vladimir at Ihwa and find very interesting stories from Czech archives. We gathered so many information from Korea, United States, Japan, as well as in Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, this is Alice Young. Actually, I found her name from North Korean document in when I was a college student, maybe 1985, something ago. At the time, North Korea argued that she was a U.S. spy, intelligence agent spy, and her name was not a Korean one. Her Korean name is Hyun Mi-ho, but not used Korean name, but Alice Hyun. And she worked for the U.S. intelligence agency named Civil Communication Intelligence Group Korea, 민간통신검열단, a very interesting organization. And she connected with Park Hyun. At the time, Park Hyun was the vice premier of North Korea, and as well as Minister of Foreign Affairs at the time. But he was executed by North Korean government as a U.S. spy because of Alice Young. And they argued that Alice was the first lover of Park Hyun when his early stay in Shanghai, 1920s. I was very fascinated at the story. There was a spy behind the political struggles in North Korea. And 10 years later, I read the U.S. military intelligence secret documents from National Archives, and they argued that Alice was a communist spy. According to the chief of U.S. intelligence agents in South Korea, they argued that Alice was a double who destroyed the mission of CCIGK, Chief Intelligence Korea. I can believe. North Korea argued that she was a U.S. spy, but U.S. military government intelligence chief argued that she was a communist spy. And then in 2000, there was widespread newspaper articles in Korea that Alice was a Korea's Mata Hari. Wow. So I was very confused, and I have dig out several information on her and write an article. And Alice might be executed in North Korea around 1956 when Park Hyun was executed. Yeah. This is a picture of Alice with her son, Wellington. And yes. And this is Park Hyun in his 20s. This picture was known as taken in Moscow 1929. According to the holder, this guy is known as Ho Chi Minh, the leader of Vietnam Revolutionary War, and this lady is Park Hyun's first wife, Ju Se-ju, and Park Hyun. And I found out, I found out this is real Ho Chi Minh, different person. And what do you think? This is real Ju Se-ju. She was famous beauty in 1920s in Seoul. Different person, not plastic surgery. and actually, I found Alice and her brother Peter from this picture. Wow. And that means that this picture was taken in Shanghai in 1920s. So I made up my mind to write this story from that point. And I think this one is Ju Se-ju, Park Hyun's first wife. Yes, different pictures taken in Cheonggyecheon River, and Ju Se-ju, a famous Korean socialist women, 고명자, 허정수. She became a minister of education, something like that. And, this one is Park Han-young, his young days. This picture was taken in Vladivostok when Park Han-young escaped from Korea after he released from prison life, and Chu Se-ju was pregnant. Their first baby and the last baby, Viviana. And yes, they separate when Park Han-young was apprehended by Japanese police, and she remarried with Park Han-young's friend, famous communist Kim Da-nya. But he also executed by Stalin in 1937, and also she was moved to a kind of labor relocation camp, and she was in orphanage until the end of the World War II. Yes. And this is Alice Hyun and her brother Peter. So who is Alice Hyun, and why did she met Park Han-young in Shanghai 2020? And she was a daughter of a famous Korean independence movement fighter named Hyun-soo. Yeah, he studied in Japan, and he became an official translator of first Korean immigration to Hawaii, 1903. And Alice was born. She was the first Korean baby who was born in Hawaii and became naturalized U.S. citizen. And Hyun-soo back to Korea and served several churches, including Cheongdong Church, the famous church in Korea. And he joined the March 1st movement and moved to Shanghai and became a representative of Korean provisional government and stayed in Washington, D.C. several years, and then back to Shanghai, and he went to Moscow conference, the first Congress of the oppressed people of the Far East, sponsored by Moscow. Yeah, very weird situation, but anyway, he moved to Hawaii and worked for the Minister of Korean Churches there, and moved LA after the end of the war and passed away 1968. He awarded Korean Patriot. Now he's in National Cemetery in. Where is he? Yeah. Alice was born in 1903, and her name is Mio. Korean name is Mio, beautiful jade. And she moved to Seoul and graduated from Ewha Girls Middle School and enrolled my college, Ewha Girls College, and then the March 1st movement started. And whole family moved to Shanghai, where her father lived, and studied Chinese missionary boarding school, and as well as in Japan. And at the time, she met with Park Han-young. Park Han-young was also joined the March 1st movement, and at first he was a nationalist. And then he went to Shanghai to study in United States, but at the time he encountered with the socialism, and he fascinated with the Marxism at the time. And according to the North Korean documents, Alice Hyun was a civilian employee of the War Department and worked for the Civil Communication Intelligence Group Korea under G2 Intelligence, and she was the first lover of Park Han-young during his stay in Shanghai in early 1920s. Yeah, but she married with another person named Jung. He also participated in the March 1st movement. They are same independent movement fighters, and Jung captured during the March 1st movement and 9 months in prison, studied at Japan Kyoto Middle School and Kansai College. Around 1922 or 1923, a baby girl was born. But at the time, Alice became a socialist, involved in revolutionary work of the Korean communist activities. She was on Russian steamship from and Shanghai to Vladivostok. According to the Japanese police, she carried a secret mission of Korean Communist Party at the time. And at the time, Moscow shed some light to Korean independence movement leaders in Shanghai in 1920s. This is well-known picture of, this is Young, middle of the road leader, and this one is Kim Yu-sik. Yeah. And Kim Yu-sik and Young was very famous Christian. They are educated in mission school, and also Young graduated from Joseon Christian Academy. And Kim Yu-sik was an adopted son of famous Underwood, and he studied Roanoke College in Virginia. And they run from Christian church and Christian colleges, and they changed their position from nationalism to socialism, Moscow Revolution, because at the time Russia was the only country who supported the cause of Korean independence movement at the time. So they participated at the Moscow conference, and this one is Hyun-soo's credential and his resume. According to the credential, is Korean name Wim Jang. There are several Korean ministers' names here. They are all well-known ministers in Shanghai, and all of them are decorated by Korean government as national patriot, nationalist. But they signed for Hyun-soo's participation at Moscow conference. And according to the Hyun-soo's resume, he was a delegate of Joseon Yesugo 대표자 회의, but he belonged to Shanghai Communist Party, and he wanted to Joseon 독립, independence of Korea, and 공산주의 실현, realization of communism in Korea, right? Something like that. And Alice's family moved to Hawaii, and Alice traveled Hawaii, Korea, China from 1924 to 1930. I don't know what happened to her life at the time. This is missing mosaic of her life. And at the time, she divorced with his wife, his husband, because I think that he has some affairs with some ladies at the time. And the political reason was he became a government officer at the time. At one time, he was an independence movement fighter, and he's turned his back to as a Japanese officer. So they divorced. But she was pregnant when she was divorced with him, and the baby was, this is her only son, Wellington Chung, was born. And she moved back to China and back to Hawaii in 1930. We don't know what happened during the time. Yeah, this is Wellington Chung. His birth certificate we found it from Charles University archives. And yeah, his father Jung attorney at law, Busan, Korea. He was raised by his grandparents at the time. There is no father and mother in his life, in his early days. And in 1931, Alice became naturalized US citizen and studied at Compton College in New York, majored in English department, but she stopped her study and returned to Hawaii. And around that period, there is saying that she joined US Communist Party Hawaii branch at the time, but we don't know exactly. There is no evidence on her participation at the Communist Party, but there are so many arguments on that. And during the Pacific War, she served in military information agency of the War Department, and also her brother Peter joined Intelligence Service Language School and OSS. At that time, the Koreans who want to the independence of Korea joined the U.S. military forces and fought against Japanese invasions. And this is a pamphlet written by Ichiro Ijuka, former communist and labor union leaders of Hawaii, and he argued that Alice was a member of U.S. Communist Party before Pearl Harbor. And after the liberation of Korea, end of the war, she relocated to Tokyo at first, and November 1945, she relocated to Tokyo with 13 Nisei women linguists to Allied translator and interpreter service under MacArthur. And her job was censor Japanese mails. But 1 month later, December, she transferred to Seoul, the Civil Communication Intelligence Group Korea, 민간통신검역단. The mission of the CCIGK is examine and intercept mail, telegraphs, and telephones. But according to the chief of intelligence, they argued that she destroyed the function of CCIGK, devil who ruined our mission. And also she met with her friends in Shanghai. 25 years later, met with Park Hyun-young, at the time head of Korean Communist Party, and with Yeon-young, at the time head of Korean People's Party. They are important political figures in Korea. And she joined communist group within military forces in Korea. Yeah. They made military forces surprised, and she was deported from Seoul, from Korea. And this is Alice Young in military uniform. This is all Nisei, Japanese linguist who landed at Tokyo November 1st, 1945. Yeah, actually I found this picture from one of the Nisei intelligence officer in Washington, D.C. and traced his contact number and met with him. Yeah, this is Mildred Yamamoto. When I visited her house in Virginia, she passed away years ago, and met with her husband, Grand Ichikawa. He was also a Nisei linguist who stationed in Japan and served as a CIA Korean desk head for several years. And he told me that there was a lady who lives in California, and I flew to LA and met with Ranko Taketa, Elaine Yagawa. And she was very shy, and I spent a lot of money to meet with her a couple of years. And I asked about Alice Young, and she told me that she was old and she was very nice. That's it. Life stories, 3 and 4 hours. Yeah. And Peter Hyun in military uniform on board to South Korea in 1945. And this is Japanese civil censorship office in Tokyo. The same organization was activated in Korea. This is a chart of Civil Communication Intelligence Group Korea intercept about postal telephone RC intercept. I think during the occupation period, to write a letter means to write an open letter, to military forces at the time. They intercept every email, every mail. And at the time, this is a recommendation letter by Park Hyun-young to Robert Klonsky, who is a member of U.S. Communist Party and stationed in South Korea. And Park Hyun-young recommended him to the head of U.S. Communist Party. And also Park Hyun-young's letter to U.S. Communist Party carried with Robert Klonsky. And this one is poster from North Korea and carried with the army forces who stationed in Korea to United States for propaganda. And this one is Klonsky and Jetway. The headline says, veteran says US-backed collaborators fuel their groups to rule over Koreans. yeah, there's a big punch to the military forces in Korea. LA Daily News was connected with Communist Party at the time. And at last, Alice was expelled from military forces in Korea, and she joined. She moved to LA and opened a record store and joined some kind of progressive Korean group, Korean Independence News, 독립신문. At the time, this newspaper is a very weird one because they are anti-United States forces in Korea and anti-Smanry and pro-communist, pro-North Korean line. And they think that Pyongyang might be their utopia and their real homeland. And they sent several letters to North Korean leaders, including Park Geun-hye and Kim Il-sung. The famous one is November 15, 1948, 이사민 선언하건 to Kim Il-sung and Park Geun-hye. There are 26 Korean Communist members in this letter, also including Alice Hyun. This is Reverend Hyun-sun, Alice Hyun, and Peter Hyun, 1948. Yeah, this one is Hanemsu, who studied in Europe during the 1930 to 1945, and yeah, this story will be continued by Vladimir Hlasny. And this one is letter written by 이사민 and 선언하건 to Kim Il-sung and Park Geun-hye. And this letter was captured during the U.S. occupation march to Pyongyang, captured at the government building in Pyongyang. And this is Reverend 이사민 and 선언하건. Also, he went to Pyongyang via Prague, and he was accused as U.S. spy by North Korea and executed around 1956 with Park Geun-hye. And this one is the only one who survived from the political turmoil during the Cold War period. He passed away last year in LA. And Alice moved to Prague with her son, Wellington. Wellington wanted to study medicine at Charles University, and he moved to Prague first, and then Alice followed. And she stayed there 9 months and left Prague. She stayed in Prague and joined several activities. And met with North Korean representatives who participated at the conference held in Prague. Yeah, this is farewell party for Wellington Chung. Yeah, this is Wellington and Reverend Hyun-sun and Alice and David Hyun. Yeah, and Peter Hyun. He passed away 2014, 13 maybe. And this picture was found by Vladimir from British Path. Anyway, yeah. They are North Korean representative, famous Park Jung-hye, 한서야 novelist. And this one is Kim Chang-jun. Yeah. And Wellington and Alice Hyun sit behind them. And when she arrived in Pyongyang, she became a personal secretary of Park Geun-hye. At that time, he was vice premier and minister of foreign affairs, and she wrote articles to the North Korean magazine. But during the Korean War period, she was caught as U.S. spy and accused as U.S. intelligence spy who connected Park Geun-hye with U.S. intelligence agency. And I think in December 1955, Park Geun-hye trial opened, and Alice and 이사민 was pointed as a critical figure who connected Park Geun-hye with U.S. intelligence agency, but they did not show up at the trial. I don't know what happened to their fate, but in August 1956, 1966, Park was executed without due process, and Alice might be executed at the time. This is 노동신문, trial on South Korean Labor Party, and yeah, several documents from National Archives. And when Alice was in prison and executed by North Korean government, her brothers in LA was testified at the House Committee on American Activities, the famous HUA, suspected as communist. Yeah. And Davis suffered to be deported for 15 years, detained at Angel Island. And at the time, her son, Wellington, stuck in Czech and committed suicide in 1963. Yeah, who is Alice Young? I think that she was a descendant of March 1st movement. She joined to the Korean independence movement, and she was raised as a nationalist family and became a nationalist. But after the March 1st movement, her family and patriots in Shanghai changed from nationalist to socialist. The only way to support from Moscow. And she was also some kind of several identities, multiple identities, because she was naturalized U.S. citizen, but she won't be, she denied her citizenship and she denied Japanese national, and she denied South Korean national as well. And she wanted to be a real Korean, but there was no real Korean when she left Korea in 1920s. She always dreamed and imagined her real Korea. There was no real Korea in reality. And she was a supporter of Korean independence movement, yes. And after liberation, she pursued her way of real Korea, anti-Korean, anti-U.S. military government in Korea, and anti-Smanry, pro-communist, and pro-North Korea. And she hoped and believed that North Korea might be her Shangri-La, hope, last hope. But she was executed in North Korea. She was a master of her own destiny, but executed in North Korea as spy. So she became known as Korea's Matahari. But I think she was some kind of revolutionary as well. That's my story. And Vladimir will continue.
So Professor Jung talked about Alice Young, the mother of Wellingtons, and she was the real revolutionary. Wellington tried to follow her in her footsteps, and but he was limited in his existence by he became adult only after the Second World War, and after that he followed his mother's advice to go to Czechoslovakia, and he tried to move to North Korea to follow his mother, but he couldn't. So he was restricted in what he could achieve. And I'll talk a little bit about his childhood, how he was growing up without his parents in Hawaii. But the real action really starts in 1945 when he becomes adult, and he, with his mother, they make a plan to try to get to North Korea through Central Europe. I'll talk a little bit about how he interacted with his mother during these years. So far, Professor Jung said that Alice Young got divorced in Korea to her husband, and as she was getting divorced, she was already pregnant with the man, and on the way to Hawaii, so she traveled to Hawaii already pregnant with a baby, and then Wellington Chung was born in Hawaii. Right? So his last name is after the father. Wellington was a name that was picked by Alice's father, Hyun-soon, after whom? After Wellington Koo, the famous politician. One thing to mention here is, so I will show a lot of pictures from Wellington's life, and you may have seen some of them actually in Peter Hyun's books. I saw that they're available in the back. So some of these pictures come from the Hyun family, but other pictures come from other sources. Let's say from the archives in Czechoslovakia, and from some friends of Wellington Chung in Prague that only recently got discovered. So there are some unique pictures to show, I think. So some of these books, some of these pictures come from Peter Hyun's books, or David Hyun also. They show how Wellington, right? So Wellington was growing up with his grandparents, Hyun-soon and Hyun-soon's wife, and we have some. I believe this is Wellington as he was growing up. This is Wellington with his grandparents. I believe this is Wellington again with his grandparents, while his father was in Korea at the time, and Wellington had no contact with him. He would never meet him. He never expressed interest in meeting his father. And his mother, Alice Hyun, was traveling on political missions between Korea, China, Japan, and Hawaii. So they didn't meet too much, and they only really met after the Second World War. So he was born in 1927, and he would only they would only settle down with his mother in 1946, I believe. So when he was 19 years old. And more. This is again a picture of Wellington as a little cowboy from the Hyun family archives. We don't have too much information about Wellington except for what his family wrote about him. So there were just accounts that he was a smiley, friendly boy, bright. We have some school records about him. Because he studied at Charles University in Prague, and so all of his school records are stored there. And he was a good student. He was planning to study medicine. His dream was to become the first doctor in his family, his first medical doctor. And actually it turned out that he would be the first Korean doctor in Czechoslovakia. After studying at Charles University. So he did preparation from middle school. He took science classes. He went to University of Hawaii, where he took some science classes. He tried to be active. He was a part of a debate team. In 1945, we believe it was probably a plan they made with his mother, that she was stationed in Seoul at the time, and it may have been a plan for Wellington to travel around the world and rejoin her there. So he joined. He became a sailor with a commercial ferry, and traveled across the world, including to China. And his plan was to disembark in China and get to Korea through China. But at the time, he didn't manage to disembark because of the Japanese-Chinese war, and so unfortunately he couldn't get off, and he had to return to Hawaii. So there was one attempt where they could have reunited and made it to their native land of Korea, and it didn't work out for him. And shortly after, it also didn't work out for Alice. She was accused by the US Army of collaborating with South Korean communists, and she was sent back. She was discharged and sent back to Hawaii. Alice Young settled in Los Angeles when she returned to the US. She bought a house, and she was renting out a house there, and I think owning a store, a liquor store maybe. And Wellington moved to Los Angeles to live with her. So finally they reunited. They stayed together for some time. Except a new event happened. That at that point, a Korean archaeologist who was working in Prague, Han Hung-soo, whose picture we saw much earlier in Professor Jung's presentation, he got in touch with Californian communists, and a group of Koreans in California got an idea to communicate through Han Hung-soo, through Prague, with North Korean leadership, and possibly to even go to Korea through Czechoslovakia. So Han Hung-soo sent a lot of letters and wrote articles for a newspaper, Korean Independence News. And in his articles, he wrote in a very flowery way about the situation in North Korea under socialism, and the situation under socialism in Czechoslovakia. And this was 1946. And I think right away, Alice Young and a couple of her colleagues and Wellington got the idea of finally traveling to North Korea through Czechoslovakia. And what we believe is that Alice and Wellington decided that Wellington would travel there first. Maybe Alice still had activities to do in California, so she would send her son ahead to study in Prague at the Charles University, and she would follow him a few months later, and maybe together or with some delay they would continue on through Moscow, Beijing to Pyongyang. So, right. Here I just put a couple of more pictures. Again, we have very few pictures of Alice and Wellington together. They were never together. So only really these three pictures. One when Wellington was born. One, this is a going away party for Wellington before he travels to Czechoslovakia. So this is his going away dinner with a full table and the whole family present. And one picture from Czechoslovakia from an international congress. We just accidentally spotted this picture in a communist propaganda video from that international congress. In the back of that picture, we see Wellington, who is bored out of his mind, and his mother maybe listening attentively to the presentations. And he was a student at the time, maybe 20 years old, so he was probably just following his mother to that presentation. Okay. So as I said, so in 1946, Alice and Wellington started living together in Los Angeles. Right then, they started receiving correspondence from Prague. And right away, they had this plan to go to Czechoslovakia. Wellington started preparing for his travel. He enrolled for 1 semester or 1 year in a pre-medical program at University of California, Los Angeles. Wrote an application to Charles University in Prague. Initially it was rejected because he couldn't speak Czech, so he wouldn't be able to follow lessons. And in November 1948, he traveled to Czechoslovakia. And on his way to Czechoslovakia, he was already helping his mother. He took a letter that was written by Koreans in California to be passed on to the North Korean leadership. So there was he took a letter with him. He passed it to Congress delegates in Prague to send with them to Pyongyang. Okay. Eventually, next year, he applied again to Charles University. He wrote an application letter in his own handwriting in Czech language. So he started studying Czech language intensively. Got accepted. And that's how Wellington received an envelope in the university archives. So we were lucky to discover his school records and other information, letters that Wellington wrote to the university, or decisions that the university wrote to Wellington through Charles University archive. Okay. At the university, Wellington tried to stay active. He participated in the student union. He went to some student congresses. But he didn't. He didn't live in a very stable way in Prague. He moved around. So. These pictures that I'm showing now are not significant. They just show the different houses where Wellington Chung lived in Prague. And I tried to trace him through these different addresses. Wellington was subleasing rooms with his colleagues, living with one a prominent American communist expat family in Prague, George Wheeler's family. And so I was impressed when I arrived at the address where I knew that Wellington had stayed, and I discovered that there is a bell still with Wheeler's name on it. So the descendants of the family still live there, and through this this Wheeler family, I was able to get some photographs of Wellington that we didn't know about before. Okay, so Wellington moved around. So he was studying there from 1949 until 1955. And one interesting trend that we observed was that he was doing well. He started studying very well. And at some point his grades dramatically deteriorated. At that point, we know that from a different archive of the secret police, we know that he became a collaborator with the secret police. And after that, Wellington's grades dramatically improved again. So we can only speculate whether there is a relationship that Wellington was forced into collaboration, and maybe he was threatened that the secret police could put him in trouble at the university. And there were some vulnerabilities that the secret police could take advantage of to pressure him into becoming a collaborator for them. So we also know that there were several spies who were reporting on Wellington's life. Throughout his life in Czechoslovakia, the regime didn't trust him. So there were two American women who were reporting on him. This woman maybe had an affair with him, maybe even to collect information on his existence. This picture is of Peggy Lash at the time when she was making an oath with secret police when she was starting her spying service for the secret police, after which she would report on Wellington's life. Rose LaVoot is another friend of Wellington's who wrote extensive notes on Wellington's life. And we see these reports in the secret police archives. Wellington's name is also in the official registry of collaborators with the secret service. So there's this after the revolution of 1989, when communism was abolished in Czechoslovakia. Many secret service files became available publicly, and the name of collaborators with the regime got online. And just searching for Wellington's name, we got several. We have some records. Now, unfortunately, many of these files were destroyed. I don't know if intentionally or just over time. So we couldn't. There is not that much information on his spying activities or his collaboration with the regime. But we know that he was officially registered with them. His code name was Hawaii. Okay. His family members are also mentioned in these secret police files. So, like I will say that he married a Czech woman, Anna, and had a daughter with her, Tabita, and a stepson, Jan. So, and all of these people are, I believe here, Chung, Anna, Chung, Tabita, Jan Šafránek is the stepson, are mentioned in secret service files, but actually there are no files. All of them were destroyed shortly after the revolution. Okay. So he graduated. I'll try to keep it really quick. At that point, so we don't know too much about his life. We know that he finished school successfully in 1955. He got assigned to work in a hospital in the far east of the country. It could mean that the regime still was skeptical about him. They didn't assign him to a hospital in Prague or around, but they sent him to the complete rural area. So this is the map of the country. This is where. So in 1948, when he came to Czechoslovakia the first time, he traveled through Europe. I think he landed in Paris and then traveled maybe by train through border crossing at Kep to Prague. There he stayed for maybe 6 years. At that point he was reassigned to work in a rural hospital in Ružomberok and stayed over a year there. At that point, because he was just done with medical studies, he was ready to go to North Korea to follow his mother. But the North Korean embassy refused to grant him visa. So he knew that he would stay in Czechoslovakia a while longer. He got lucky. He got reassigned to a different hospital closer to Prague in a resort town, Karlovy Vary. And since then he spent his time in this region. Karlovy Vary are in the region that belongs under the regional capital Pilsen, That's the Pilsner Urquell. It comes from there. So when he started working at this hospital, he collaborated with the doctors in Pilsen to do medical research with them. And from Karlovy Vary, he could also easily travel to Prague by train if he wanted to meet his expat friends or the arrivals from the Korean Americans who were arriving in Prague from the US. You may remember some of these pictures before. These people are the associates of Alice Hyuns from California. Isa Min was a reverend and colleague of Alice Hyuns who traveled through Prague with her. So he also traveled from California through Prague to Pyongyang, and he also vanished or was executed around the same time when Pak Hyun and Alice Hyun was executed. Kwak Chung Soon and Kwak Chun Cha were musicians from South Korea who worked around Chicago and New York City, and eventually they were deported from the US, and they also chose Czechoslovakia as their deportation country, and from Czechoslovakia they continued on to Pyongyang, and there they vanished. Son Woo-hak-won traveled around the same time as Alice Hyun from California to Prague, stayed maybe less than a year in Prague, and then he decided that he saw enough of communism and decided to return to the US. So originally, at least he alleges that he wanted to continue to Pyongyang, but he says that he changed his mind and decided to live in the US and to renounce communism. We also think that North Korea refused to grant him visa, and that was another reason why he didn't continue, didn't stay in Czechoslovakia, but returned to the US. Jung and his wife Anna Song, another couple that worked with Alice Hyun, part of Korean independence news, and became deported for their communist activities. They chose Czechoslovakia as their deportation country, and from there they continued to Pyongyang and vanished. And Daima Kim and his Russian-born American wife, also he was deported for communist activities in California, chose Czechoslovakia as his deportation country, continued to Pyongyang and vanished. So Wellington knew these people from their association with Alice. He likely met them in California. He stayed with Isa Min in New York City for a few months. And it's likely that at the time when they were passing through Prague, Wellington met them on the way. We have just a couple of pictures of Wellington when he worked as a doctor. Wellington with some colleagues, Wellington performing surgery. These pictures are from George Wheeler and his family, because Wellington, when he worked in Karlovy Vary, in the resort town, he sent his friends these pictures. Wellington tried to stay active. He translated some books from English into Czech, or vice versa. I believe the other way around. From Czech into English, and he did original medical research either by himself or with doctors in his hospital. he got married and had a daughter. This is his newborn daughter with stepson. Oops. But Wellington was trapped in Czechoslovakia. So his daughter was born in 1958. By that time, he may have heard rumors that his mother was executed. And so he knew that he couldn't continue to Pyongyang. He also kept getting rejections from the North Korean embassy. At that time, also his uncles in California were being persecuted, and they were interrogated by various federal agencies for their communist activities, and Wellington was openly communist, so he couldn't go back to the U.S. either. So he felt trapped. He actually renounced his U.S. citizenship, became a Czech citizen. We have some letters that he sent to his relatives in California, and that they sent him. And these are very sad letters, where they're so happy that he has a baby, but yet they're very sad that it's not likely that they will meet him soon. And so in 1963, all we know is that one day on October 28th, which is coincidentally, it's the Czechoslovak Day of Independence from Austria-Hungary, so it's a holiday. He locked himself in the laboratory of his hospital and took pills and took his life. We can only speculate that his desperation and his entrapment in Czechoslovakia were some of the reasons that forced him to take his life. We have a record of Wellington's funeral, and the last thing I can say that after his death, his family, his wife and 2 children struggled, but within a year they succeeded at moving to California with the help of the Jung family. So they reunited with the Jungs in California. They lived in this house apparently, and we have some pictures from the Jung family archive or from George Wheeler of their life in the U.S. after Wellington's death. So this is Anna Shatranková, Wellington's wife, Tabita daughter, stepson Jan, with George Wheeler and I think David Jung in Los Angeles. And here we have another picture, Anna Shatranková with the Jung family at a family reunion. Oops. And maybe finally, a big family picture of Anna, her husband, her new husband in California, and Tabita, stepson, and the Jung family. Last picture, oops, that I will leave on the screen is the future of Wellington's family. Wellington's stepson, Wellington's grandsons, Wellington's daughter, and Wellington's wife 3 years ago with Wellington's daughter, still living in California. Thank you very much.
We have some questions. Questions? Jack Crow. Yeah, there.
I can just speak. Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you for the lecture. It was a great. I just had a question about the political history of the time period that they're working under. To me, it seems extremely dubious and ill-advised for instance, at 1946, try to go to South Korea, where there was the biggest issue that was happening there was the Daegu uprising, which was basically an anti-American uprising, where they were trying to oust all Americans from the peninsula. At the same time, they were anti-Soviet, but pro-communist, trying to get into North Korea, where it was a provisional government pre-Kim Il-sung, and they hated Soviets. And at the same time, Japan's like being ousted from that North Korean region. And later, Wellington goes to Czechoslovakia, which again, there was a huge Stalinist movement against international communists. So they were basically massacring international communists. So what I can't personally reconcile is why would anyone in their right mind want to be in every part of the world where they're the most persecuted? I mean, every place that they were in at that time period was trying to kill them. And how much of this could have been chalked up to, say, media distortion, or the fact that they were just unaware of what was going on, or some idealism that kind of obscured the situation?
It's very hard to explain the question, but I think that at the time the Korean intellectuals and left-wing leaders were very naive, and they didn't know the reality of Stalin period Soviet Union. They follow their activities during the colonial period as independence movement, and after Korean liberation, they stand the same position against foreign occupation, and they want liberation of Korean Peninsula, so they want to oust U.S. occupation forces from Korea, and at least follow his friends who was the political figures in Korea, such as Pyongyang and Pyongyang, and they are all oppressed by U.S. military forces. And one of them was assassinated by Jung, and one went to North Korea. So Alice and her son want to follow their friends in North Korea. And that's my
I can just add that, the communist coup d'etat in Prague was only in 1948. So at that time, I said that this Korean group in California decided to go through Czechoslovakia to Pyongyang. That was before the coup d'etat happened. Han Yong-soo, the person in Prague who lured them to do it, he himself left Czechoslovakia just a month after the uprising. So up until that February of 1948, nobody could have expected that the situation would change. Up until then, it was a very free, liberal democracy. So the Czechoslovakia was very friendly both with the U.S. and with Soviet Union and North Korea. So the conditions looked really good there. That it would be easy to travel to Czechoslovakia and also from Czechoslovakia on to Pyongyang. And there was just not too much information, so people didn't expect what would happen to them.
Jack Crow.
Thank you, professors, for your presentation. My question is for Professor Hlasny. You pointed out that several North Koreans went to or through Czechoslovakia. Sorry, several Korean people went to or through Czechoslovakia to get to North Korea, or decided to stay there, or got trapped there. What about other Eastern Bloc countries? Do we know anything about Koreans who, for example, went to Poland or Hungary at the same time?
No. We know that some of these people, and Professor Jung might know more about this, but we know that many of these Koreans in California applied to, or in the US generally, applied to different embassies, to Soviet Union, Poland, and even others like India and so on, but they didn't hear back, or they didn't receive the permission. Only, and it worked out somehow through Czechoslovakia.
Thank you for your presentation and research. What I'm wondering about as I look at the faces of the family members is, did any of them know the story of their parents or grandparents? And how did they react to think that they might have ended up in North Korea? You know, people vanished, and et cetera.
We don't know much. We haven't interviewed them.
Oh, okay.
We only got in touch with Tabita, the daughter, but she, I think she was a little bit sheltered from her family's history. Her mother didn't want to expose her, so Tabita herself didn't know. She knew that her father committed suicide, but she didn't know why. And we couldn't. The only member of the family here that would have some information is Anna, the wife of Wellington's, but she's in poor state of health, so we couldn't get in touch with her. But I think they know the family history. They are in touch with the Young family, so they know everything that Peter Young has written. But maybe they view it as a kind of as a story of another family. They don't consider themselves as the survivors, victims, or so on.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Park Soo-ye, and Professor Chung, you said that you were attracted to the family history of theirs, and of course, decades ago, Korea was really, really impoverished country, but I think in some aspect they were kind of privileged because they got highly educated and they had famous friends and they lived a very international life back and forth between Korea and US and Japan and Russia and so on. But ended up in a tragedy, like committing suicide and being executed. But if you had a chance to decide, would you rather live a life as a spy under political turmoil, like similar to theirs, or are you just satisfied with your current life as a university professor?
I think that Alice and Wellington were the citizens, U.S. citizens, so they have a liberty of free travel. So U.S. visa and U.S. passport made them travel across over the world. And at the time in Korea, nobody imagined to travel across the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans to Prague, Beijing, Moscow, to Pyongyang. It was impossible for them. But Alice and Wellington were the citizens of the United States that enabled them to travel across the border, and they made their destiny.
Thank you very much.